Chase Edmonds, running back with the Arizona Cardinals, and you're listening to Fantasy Whispers podcast. Make sure you guys tune in so you can get the scoop on the best moves for your fantasy team. These guys got great information, help you win out on your team, man. Go Bird Gang.
Yes, we're back again.
Hey, let's pump up the volume.
Right here.
What's up, Whisper Nation? It's Tuesday, July 30th, and you're listening to episode 70 of the Fantasy Whispers with your hosts, Johnny Game Time Hicks, and I'm Big Travy. If you want to follow the show, you can do so on Twitter at TF Whispers. You can also find us on YouTube and Instagram at the Fantasy Whispers, and you should definitely visit the website, thefantasywhispers.com. Of course, we got articles, latest episodes, rankings, but most importantly, we now have our fully loaded 2019 fantasy football draft kit, and our Patreon account is live. There's links to that as well. And of course, if you want some of this swag, check out this hat I'm rocking here. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can get hats, shirts, mugs, koozies, whatever you want over at thefantasywhispers.com. We got our shop up and running. So welcome in, Whisper Nation. So good to be back with you, Johnny. We're jumping into the NFC West today, as we were previewed a little bit by our boy out of your backyard at the top of the show here, Chase Edmonds.
Yeah, man, super excited. That was awesome having him give us a shout out there. That was really cool. Super excited for this show, though. NFC West is something that, obviously I pay close attention to just because the Cardinals are my team. My home team, but and then they're not only that, but they're one of your favorite home teams, I should say, the LA Rams. So this is fun. We probably know these teams a little bit more in depth than any other section. No, yeah. I wouldn't say that.
Well,
maybe
I wouldn't go that far, but we definitely have a kinder eye looking at some of these teams in this division. And it's just a fun division. If we're being honest right now about what's going on in this division, it's one of the more fun ones to talk about. So I'm really excited to talk about it.
Well,
so Johnny, I
before we jump
ahead.
in here, Travis, I got to do it. I got to give a shout out. This is the start of Shark Week, Travis. I don't know if you like watching the Shark Week. I grew up loving Shark Week, and so I get drawn into it like a tractor beam. Sucks me right in. I can't do it.
What's your favorite shark?
I would probably have to say, dude, there's something so fascinating about the great white shark that is really, really cool. But I got to give a shout out to hammerhead sharks. Those things are just wild looking. So I'm like, that thing is
gotta
cool.
give a shout out to hammerhead sharks, like as if they're listening to the podcast.
Also, you never know with technology these days, and their disposable income in that ocean. Who's not to say that they don't listen to podcasts, dude? Also, when I was in Florida, I went fishing and I caught a hammerhead shark. It was really, we released it. We threw it back, but it was such a cool experience. I love sharks, man. They're just so interesting.
Yeah, sharks are definitely interesting. They're straight, dominant top of the food chain, pretty much, especially the great white sharks.
Mm-hmm.
But talking about the Los Angeles Rams, they were nearly the top of the food chain last year, Johnny, until they got, kind of embarrassed, shut down in the Super Bowl by the New England Patriots.
Wait, so you're really going to call that the Super Bowl? Because, man, that was terrible.
It was embarrassing, that's for sure. Listen, it's hard not to be excited about the Rams here. They've got a lot of talent on the squad, but there are some things that got us a little bit questioned here. And so, Johnny, I'm going to let you kick this off. What is your biggest storyline, your biggest piece of information you're going to be watching closely as these training camps keep waging on?
So for me, it's the wide receiver core. And I know that we already know that they're all going to be very, very valuable. But they're all going around the same area in the redraft leagues. Travis Cook's 406, Woods 408, and Cooper Kupp is 503. So if you can nail the right one and get what would presumably be the 1A on an explosive offense, because they're all such in that same cluster of value, I think that there's a huge advantage. So what I'm looking for, I have right now projected Robert Woods actually as the emerging 1A here, but I'm keeping a close eye on Cooper Kupp. He avoided the PUP list to start camp, which is great news, but he could be a little bit slower to come back to start this season, so he might be a guy that I would be willing to trade for a little bit later. So I've kind of hindered him or dropped him down a little bit in my redraft rankings. But so I'm going to be looking at how is Woods. Is he really looking like he's trying to step up and take that next step as the number one wide receiver on a very potent offense? Or is that connection becoming a little bit more with Brandon Cooks? Because if Brandon Cooks can develop a relationship without Cooper Kupp there, we've seen the numbers between Cooper Kupp and Brandon Cooks when they're on the field and when they're off the field. And Brandon Cooks is a better receiver when Cooper Kupp is on the field. So go ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of funny you mentioned that because Kupp kind of does a lot of good things for everybody in the offense. Cooks is one. Jared Goff is somebody who, in those 24 games that he's played with Cooper Kupp, he averages 279 yards and 1.9 touchdowns. He's played 11 games without Cooper Kupp, and he averages 250 yards only and 1.45 touchdowns. So he drastically goes down. And so, to Johnny's point here about talking about the wide receivers and how it shakes out, Cooper Kupp's return, it really means a big thing for everybody in the offense here, and not just for the wide receivers themselves. I really like that too, Johnny. I'm really going to be watching here because Woods, I like that you have Woods ranked above Cooks here. If people actually look at what Woods does, he's a great blocker. He's great with the ball in his hands. He's just a better all-around wide receiver for this offense, for the scheme that we're doing. So it's kind of interesting, and he balled out last year. So we're big fans of Woods, and I think that he in this offense, especially if we see something happen with Todd Gurley and the offense needs to rely more on the passing game, you could be looking at some great value from all three of these guys if you're able to scoop up one.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Travis, I know you have a different area of the field that you're looking at as far as into training camp.
I don't know if you've heard of this storyline at all. I don't know if you've been listening at all, but Todd Gurley's knee is actually a pretty big storyline coming out of LA. No, but all kidding aside, I think Malcolm Brown is a guy that's basically going, pretty late in drafts, basically free. And I think that's kind of something to keep an eye on because I know, right now what's happened with Darrell Henderson is his ADP has gone way too high and he's just being drafted a little bit too high. And I think we may have overreacted just a little bit here on Darrell Henderson. Not that I don't love Darrell Henderson. I mean, Johnny, Whisper Nation knows Darrell Henderson was my favorite running back to come out of this draft class. I've been touting him. I thought he was a great prospect. When I watched the film, he jumped off the page. But I think Malcolm Brown is a guy that's been in the system a little bit longer, actually projects to be of a more 3-down back than Darrell Henderson does, just based on size and based on his repertoire. The only thing Malcolm Brown has never seen over 63 carries in a season, and he's been that journeyman backup. So just be ready to scoop Malcolm Brown to try and get a piece of that Rams offense, that running game, if anything.
It was really interesting because if you follow our mock drafts, Travis can attest to this, that we saw these huge fluctuations with the news with Todd Gurley and exactly how bad it is, supposedly. And then we saw like a spike in Darrell Henderson's value for redraft leagues. And then it went back down. It's starting to go back down a little bit. And Malcolm Brown, meanwhile, this whole time has remained a tremendous value. And so if you take Todd Gurley in your drafts, or even if you don't, Travis, what are you looking at? What round are you comfortable taking Malcolm Brown and stashing him on your bench?
Well, so far I've seen him, in redraft standard leagues. He's been there in like the 13th, the 14th, even the 12th. I think all of those are decent times to take him. Look, you're taking lottery tickets in that sense anyways. And if you heard us talk about, the AFC East preview, talking about the New England Patriots, the whole thing was take a piece of the Patriots backfield because you get good value if your piece ends up hitting on a team that's going to rush a ton. And I think the Rams are no different. They're going to be a high-powered run offense that you're going to want a piece of. They're going to live in scoring range because of the effectiveness of that off. And I think if you get Malcolm Brown in the 13th, 14th, 15th of your draft, and you're sitting there and something happens to Gurley and they decide Malcolm Brown's running the ball a little bit better and they want to keep Henderson maybe in that satellite role as the change of pace back, I think you're sitting there pretty with Malcolm Brown.
Yeah.
But moving on here, Johnny, let's talk about the next team. Another exciting team, maybe a bounce-back candidate here for sure with a whole healthy Jimmy Garoppolo this year. That's the San Francisco 49ers. And, Johnny, for me, my biggest thing is, once again, the running back room and who's going to lead this backfield. Because last year, if we combine the 49 running backs,
Yeah.
they kind of seemed like they had that many.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate going through. They were picking up guys on the sidewalk.
Dude, I thought they were going to sign old Johnny Game Time there for a second.
I would have put out my resume if I didn't have to commute such a long drive.
Yeah, that's right. So if we combine those 49er running backs last year, they would have gained nearly 1,800 yards and averaged 4.9 per carry as a group. That's really good efficiency. We've seen what Shanahan does. It's pretty much a lock that if he has one guy, he's a top 15 fantasy running back. That's just kind of the way he runs his system. They're going to use him a lot. McKinnon already landing on the PUP list, but even today they have, we just received word that he could come off the PUP list easily. I like Coleman to be
By
the
this
guy.
Thursday, they say.
Yeah, that's what they're saying. So maybe even by the time you're listening to this, he's off the PUP list. But
or it could be depending on when you are listening. Depending on when you're listening to this, he could be right back on there.
No joke, huh?
Oh.
But I just think Tevin Coleman's been a guy I've been targeting a lot. He's a guy that has the history with Kyle Shanahan. And I like Breda late, too, because you're getting good value on Breda. So if you want to get Coleman and then stack it with Breda so you get a little bit of protection there, I do think we're going to lean to get one guy that gets some of the looks here. And I think it will be Coleman, but just in case.
And here's the thing with Coleman. I absolutely love his value right now. And every year he's kind of like like a poor man's Melvin Gordon, in that Melvin Gordon always receives hate throughout every draft and ends up slipping, even though he's consistently amongst the best running backs in the league. And the same kind of goes with Tevin Coleman, not, of course, into that elite status, but just as a running back too, or, a solid running back too. And let's not forget, last year there were a ton of rumors when Kyle Shanahan was over there as the coach. They were looking for running backs. And it was heavily rumored that the 49ers were going to try to trade for Tevin Coleman because he fits the scheme so well. And so why wouldn't they? Now, I understand that, they paid McKinnon a bunch of money for a running back. But here's the thing, as we just joked about, McKinnon gets injured all the time. And Tevin Coleman's been pretty solid from the running back position. He's been pretty durable. So if I'm going to take a stab, I do agree with Travis. I think it goes Tevin Coleman, and I'm completely comfortable with his ADP. I think that's a steal. And then my second choice would be Breida, and then that would be followed by McKinnon.
Who's also a steal, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
Like, Breida's a steal at the 13th, going to have great value there, and especially if you draft Coleman, you're going to want to love to be able to wait and pick up Breida.
Exactly, and you got to think that they're going to use this backfield like they used Atlanta's backfield a few years ago. So you had Freeman and Coleman there. So what's to say that this can't be Breida and Tevin Coleman, and you're getting Breida like super late? As we say, ADP is 1301 in a half-point PPR league right now. That's insane.
Yeah.
That screams value to me, Travis.
Screams it.
Screams it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But now we're going to move on to the next team that I'm really excited to talk about. I know you're really excited to talk about. You got the hat on. You got David Johnson in the background. This might as well be a Cardinals show.
I'm Travis. I'm going to announce something now. I'm actually stepping out. I'm going to start a Cardinals podcast. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just messing with you guys.
Well, I don't blame you. I don't think there's been a more fascinating team this offseason than the Arizona Cardinals. A little it's a little mind-boggling too, like how I'm trying to rank them out this offseason. You can't really get a grip on how you want to project this team because you basically get to throw last year away. They are completely different from last year, completely different head coach, completely different running game, run style they should be running here. They got a quarterback, a number 1 overall pick. Josh Rosen's gone. They drafted all these wide receivers. Pro Football Focus gave them the best graded draft. There is just so much here, Johnny, and I just want to know how good, realistically, can we expect the Cardinals to be? Because if I look at last year, and I know it's hard to do that, but like they ran 902 plays. On average, that was 56.37 plays per game. Kingsbury and DJ are out there saying they're going to run 90 plays. I think we both know that's not going to happen, but
70,
can they get to the
is good.
Can they get to the 70 mark? Can they get to the 67 mark like Baltimore, like New England, like Indy, like the Rams? Do we have trust in all of these moves to really come together here? I know that, Johnny, you're going to love all these moves and think that, but I'm just trying to – I don't know if I'm getting a little bit of playing devil's advocate or if I'm just like looking at these rankings and going, can I really legitimately give them this many plays?
I definitely think you can. If you look at what Kingsbury has done in college, now I know this is the NFL game and it's more difficult and things like that, but he was consistently in the top 10, even top 5 at running plays in all of college. So to come in and think that just because, yes, his offense is something that we haven't seen before, and so people get scared off of that, but Chip Kelly, I would hate to compare him to Chip Kelly because I think he's going to be a better NFL coach than Chip Kelly. But Chip Kelly's offense, when it came into the NFL, everyone was doubting that one, and they were up there in plays. They ran 65 plays a game. And that first year, this is the other reason why I'm not so skeptical that the offense won't run so well this year is that when you looked at Chip Kelly's offense, people doubted it, people questioned it, and it really did work. That first year, it was really well ran because a lot of people in the NFL were not used to it. They weren't ready. And then what happened, like the second year, it slowed down a little bit more, and the third year, it fell off the train.
And a lot of that was Chip. Well, and a lot of that was actually Chip Kelly becoming a GM and doing a lot of things to that roster that weren't good. He should have stayed in his lane and kind of did what he did. And you're right. I mean, that's how the NFL kind of works. There's always these shock waves that come through, like, Wildcat, obviously, some of these things, the read option when it was Colin Kaepernick and Russell Wilson kind of taking the league by storm with the read option, some of these air raid, shades of air raid with Kansas City. I think that the Cardinals have a good shot. And then, if you look at their schedule, let me just pull that up here. I think the Cardinals schedule, they have a real good shot at winning, 3 out of their 4 first games.
Yeah.
Let me see here. Yeah. So I just think they could get off to a hot start and really just dominate the league here. But for how long? And do we think they're going to keep up that pace the entire year?
It will slow down at times, or, maybe towards the end of the season, they won't be because they'll be a little bit more tired. But overall, it's not making me significantly downgrade the number of plays. I think that there's a real shot that we do get at least 70 plays a game, and if not, 75. We might even get some games, depending on the game script, where there is 80. But I think when we look back at the end of the year, it will be a total of around average 70 plays per game. Travis, I pulled up the schedule here.
Yeah, I just got it as well. I mean, you got the Lions. I think that's a winnable game.
Yeah.
Ravens might be a little tough.
Well, that
Seahawks
isn't the same as it was last year. So
I think the Seahawks is a winnable game. The Bengals for sure. So they've got some winnable games here at the beginning. Of the season,
and there's not really a whole lot of scary defenses that you're facing. Okay, Detroit Lions, they'll have a decent defense. Middle of the road, I would say. Ravens, middle of the road. They lost a lot of key players this offseason, mostly, and now we got the Mr. Inside Man on that game. So we have that one. Carolina Panthers defense. That could be probably the most difficult of the starting 6 games. Seahawks, that is here in Arizona, so not in Seattle. And then Bengals defense, not scared of that one, or the Atlanta Falcons defense. And then the Giants defense following that. So Arizona could get off to a hot start. All of that roundabout way, but Arizona could get off to a hot start.
Yeah.
And then it could be too late to try to get any of these pieces by then, Travis. But something I want to talk about before we move on from the Arizona Cardinals is my question to you. Is Larry Fitzgerald being overlooked in drafts? And
I 100% believe he is. I mean, what we're seeing right now, I mean, what's his ADP at? The 8th round right now?
Yeah,
So,
8,
and I think it's, so even almost the 9th. I've been snagging him a bunch in mock drafts that we've been doing because the value's just there. Like, if we think he's not going to be, like, don't call me crazy because I know he played with Kurt Warner, but like we could be looking at maybe the most talented quarterback he's ever played with.
Yeah.
Like, and obviously he's a little bit older in his career, but we know the slot receiver feasts in Kingsbury's offense. And if they continue to use him a lot in the slot like they have in his career, he could be looking at a lot of targets. And who better for Kyler Murray to lean on than the old vet, Larry Fitzgerald?
Exactly. And then if you look at what he's done, Larry Fitzgerald has had 7 wide receiver 2 finishes or better in 2017. I'm throwing 2018 out the window because that was just a terrible year. We want to forget about that completely. So if you look at 2017, he had 7 wide receiver 2 finishes, and 5 of those games he was a wide receiver 1, right? So if you look at those 5 games where he was a wide receiver 1 in 2017, 4 of those games he was a wide receiver 5 for the week or better. So he is giving you tremendous upside there. And then if you look even further than that, 3 out of the last 4 years he has finished as a true wide receiver 1, top 12 3 out of the last 4 years. So to me, I think where he is going in drafts and redraft leagues, people are just writing him off automatically because we're enamored with other players on this, other wide receivers, other players specifically on this offense, that Fitzgerald is starting to fall, and I'm willing to take advantage of that.
Yeah, he's one of those players, like a Deshaun Jackson or even an Alshon Jeffrey that continues to be a little bit disrespected and falls down in the ranks. Some of these older wide receivers that you're like, you can get good value on. And like we know statistically, rookie wide receivers don't do too well in that first year. And so it may take a little while for them to get going with the young guy, Kyler Murray. And so I like Larry Fitzgerald as much as anybody in the 8th round for sure. All right, so our final team from the NFC West, Johnny, is the Seattle Seahawks. Last year, they were just a juggernaut running the football. And so my big question here, Johnny, is like, how much is that going to stay the same? Should we expect to see some more positive regression in them throwing the football a little bit more this year? That's kind of my big question on how it's going to work out. The rushing attempts last year, Seattle, 534, that was second in the NFL. And then if you look at their passing attempts, I mean, they were dead last, 427. Tennessee Titans, Miami Dolphins, the Arizona Cardinals, the Buffalo Bills, all these teams threw more than the Seattle Seahawks last year. And yet, we got things like Russell Wilson shattering his career touchdown rate with Tyler Lockett catching 10 touchdowns.
Defying all the odds.
Yeah, I don't like Russell Wilson as much this year. I think they're going to continue to run a lot, but I just don't see him being that low in volume. How about you?
Yeah, I don't think that this year they will be similar to. I mean, they're going to run the ball a lot. We know that, but I do think that they will tend to pass a little bit more than they did last year because let's face it, they just paid Russell Wilson, and they're not. I mean, was that extended last year? Yeah, it was, but I think that they didn't necessarily have the pieces to throw as much as they wanted to last year. They had Tyler Lockett, and that was essentially it. They had, David Moore, which I do like David Moore coming into this year. I think he's, evolved a little bit more, and then they draft DK Metcalf. And so I think his options now around, and they also, his tight end went out early in the season too. So he didn't have a lot of weapons where if they were to throw the ball, they could be confident that they were going to gain yards, as well as they were super confident if they ran the ball, they were going to get positive yards, because that offensive line is really good at run blocking. And so this year, I do expect them to run or to pass more, because they do now have the pieces and people are healthy right now. So I do see a step forward for Russell Wilson. However, this doesn't mean that I'm so high on his passing options this year that I'm upgrading him at quarterback. I still have him way down deep in my quarterback rankings. Deep in my quarterback rankings. I've been telling people stay away from him in redraft leagues because his value is just not there this year compared to other guys. And so for me,
so what does that mean for you for the pass catchers? Are you looking at a guy like DK Metcalf? Are you looking at David Moore? How do you feel about Tyler Lockett? Because it's not likely that multiple of these guys are going to be somebody, right? So, is it going to be something similar to Jacksonville in the past, where we're trading off these guys every week? Is it a cycle?
I think that you'll see that with David Moore and DK Metcalf. I think that Tyler Lockett will be the consistent wide receiver in this offense, and that's why I'm okay with where his value is. I would like him to drop a little bit more in order for me to feel really confident and pick. I would like him more as my flex wide receiver as opposed to my wide receiver 2, which he's currently would be slated for if according to his ADP. But DK Metcalf and I think David Moore both are going to be nice receivers, but it is going to be, which week do I end up starting him? It'll definitely go with matchups and things like that to determine which is the better play on those days. But the only wide receiver in this group that I think will be consistent will be Tyler Lockett.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think Metcalf is maybe a year or two away from being a consistent weapon in this offense, but wouldn't be surprised to see him rattle off 6-7 touchdowns this year. I just don't know if you're going to be able to bank on which week it's going to be, right?
100%, absolutely. And I could definitely see them using him as a tight end option. So there's that.
Yeah, you could definitely see that, and he'll be a red zone guy, and we're just a couple years removed from seeing Jimmy Graham gobble up a ton of touchdowns in the red zone for them, so maybe DK's able to do that. All right, Whisper Nation, we want to know what you think about the NFC West. Go ahead and comment below. If you're on YouTube, drop us a line on any of our social media platforms if you're questioning some of these storylines within the NFC West. Johnny, which one of these that we talked about today would you say is probably the most important one you'll be keeping your eye on the most as far as the storylines are concerned?
Well, I really am interested in the Rams wide receivers just because I think there is an opportunity there to really get a guy who can jump out. No matter if it's Cooks, if it's Wood, or Kupp, I think that out of the three of them, there is a tier jumper in there. And so I want to be able to grab one of those guys. And I want to try to, focus on that to pick which one I think that has the best odds there.
Yeah, and that's interesting you brought that up because in our draft kit, which you can get at thefantasywhispers.com, we have a great write-up on all three of the Rams wide receivers that our sponsor Fanatic did and put in the draft kit at the end of our player profiles. So you can get that download for only $10 at thefantasywhispers.com, the entire draft kit, and in there is that article about the NFC West or the Los Angeles Rams wide receivers. So head on over to thefantasywhispers.com. For this time, I'm Big Travy. That's Johnny Game Time Hicks, and we are the Fantasy Whispers, and we're out. Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Whisperers podcast. You can hear more from John and Travis on Google Play, SoundCloud, and iTunes. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at TF Whisperers.